So we've got an interesting little discussion video to have today because, well, if you're a Nintendo Switch 2 owner, you would know that not all ports are created equal. We've seen some pretty impressive ports. Games like Street Fighter 6, one of my favorite ports on the system, WWE 2K25, which I think is right up there with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 version of the games in terms of the visuals and the performance of the game. And then we have some pretty questionable ports. Games like Madden 26. I know it's fine for a lot of people, at least they say that it's fine, and that's great. I'm glad you're enjoying the game, but I don't think it's fine whatsoever. And then we have some upcoming games. Games like Elden Ring, games like Star Wars Outlaws. Now, obviously, these games have not released on the Nintendo Switch 2 yet, but they have been shown at several various events that are happening because they are scheduled to be coming out, with Star Wars Outlaws actually coming out later on this week. And the performance tests haven't been exactly very promising. Input lag, questionable graphics, so on and so forth. And many people are wondering, why does there seem to be such a large divide between certain ports running well and running optimized and certain ports not running very well on the Switch 2? Well, a prominent game developer and CEO of Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, actually had to say something very interesting about this. And I feel like this is kind of an onion statement that you could peel back many layers on. There is the Switch 2 aspect of it, and then there's the general gaming aspect of it as well. So I kind of want to go over what was said by Tim Sweeney and then give some thoughts on it. So obviously there are problems with certain engines on the Nintendo Switch 2 thus far. I think Frostbite definitely has some kinks that need to be worked out. And of course, Unreal Engine 5. Borderlands 4 is an Unreal Engine 5 game that is coming to the Switch 2, and allegedly it's not running all that great. It targets 30 frames per second, but it often goes well below that when there's multiple enemies on the screen. Well, of course, Epic Games is the company behind the Unreal Engine 5, and CEO and former game developer Tim Sweeney said that the problem isn't necessarily with the engine or any sort of engine, it's more so that it lies with the developers and taking time to optimize things. Now, Tim Sweeney did say that Fortnite runs really well on the Nintendo Switch 2. And it does from what I've seen. I haven't played it on the Switch 2 because, really, if you think about it, Fortnite to an extent kind of ruined gaming. But that's a topic for another day, that one day I'll take out my tinfoil hat and really go down the rabbit hole of how, the post-Fortnite apocalypse that we've seen in gaming has been extremely detrimental, with all of these companies trying to chase these certain highs that Fortnite hits as a free-to-play game, thus making people not want to buy other games, thus limiting the scope of the video game marketplace. There's so many games that get released on Steam every single day, yet the vast majority of people only play about 60-plus games at one given time. But like I said, that's for another video. We're not gonna dive into that. But basically, Tim goes on to say the following. The primary reason is the development process. Many developers begin by developing games for high-end hardware, then optimize and test on low-spec devices in the final stages. Ideally, optimization should be implemented early. Of course, optimization is by no means an easy task. It is a very difficult one. Ideally, optimization should be implemented early in development before full-scale content building begins. To address these issues, we are preparing two main approaches. Then Sweeney said that there's an automated optimization in future Unreal Engine 5 updates that will help, and they're also going to have developer training courses that can help with getting this engine optimized for the Nintendo Switch 2. And by extension, other systems. So I don't necessarily think what is being said here is wrong, especially when you look at the Switch 2 portion of the fact of the matter, because we know that the dev kit situation hasn't been exactly optimal thus far, and it definitely seems like some companies have had dev kits longer than other companies, but then it also seems like some companies just don't really care. Bandai Namco, I know they're working with Sakurai on Kirby Air Riders, but they're also doing Dragon Ball Sparking Zero 2, which is 8, 10, 30 frames per second on the Switch 2, and 720p 30 frames per second on the Switch 1. It's clear that they do not care about the Switch 2 version of the game because obviously you could get better performance out of the system than that. If we didn't have subject test matters such as Street Fighter 6, such as WWE 2K25, then yeah, I could sit here and say, well, you know, there could be a performance issue with just the system itself. But I think those games existing on the platform clearly show that that's not necessarily the case, especially when the Xbox Series S version of Street Fighter 6 looks worse than the Switch 2 version does when you're in the one-on-one fighting mode game, which is the main meat and potatoes of the game. WWE 2K25, it's 60 frames per second. It feels so good, and it runs so good. So obviously optimization I mean, it's this huge important thing about this. And as time goes on, optimization will get better because companies that are working on Switch 2 versions of the games will have longer times. You got to remember, a lot of these games, they're trying to meet the holiday deadline just to get some quick sales, especially a game like Star Wars Outlaws. I expect Star Wars Outlaws to be an absolute mess. It was available to play at PAX West behind closed doors, but you couldn't take any footage, and everything was kind of, at least from the GVG video, things were in very small contained areas and the performance was not great. I know some Twitter accounts are saying, oh, it looks really good, and I'm just kind of like, it probably doesn't, but okay, you know, if it looks good to you, that's fine. That's my new mantra. I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth. If you think something is great, think that it's great. You're not going to convince me otherwise. So I do think that if, you know, Star Wars Outlaws had more time, Madden 26 had more time, you know, these games would look and perform better on the hardware because there is that sort of adjustment curve. But like I said, this isn't necessarily just about the Nintendo Switch 2, because who is the company that is saying this? It's Epic Games CEO's Tim Sweeney with Unreal Engine 5. And I'm sorry, but when there is a common denominator for many current generation games, current gen, of course, being the PlayStation 5, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch 2, and a lot of these games that have issues in terms of performance, sizable issues, all seem to be running Unreal Engine 5. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And I almost feel like you're kind of putting the blame on these people for not understanding the engine, but you're also not doing a great job of helping these people understand the engine. Like Metal Gear Solid Delta. Metal Gear Solid Delta should have been at a locked 60 frames per second, and there should have been a graphics mode that looked even better that maybe had a variable fluctuating frame rate. Unreal Engine 5 is what powers Metal Gear Solid Delta, and Metal Gear Solid Delta isn't a very optimized game, no matter what platform you play it on. PC, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 5 Pro, Xbox Series. I played and I beat the game already because I know exactly what I'm doing. It took me 6 hours and 12 minutes, and that was with me watching some of the cutscenes. I kind of skipped some of the cutscenes as the game went on because I realized it was just a one-to-one replication of the exact same cutscenes, just with the prettier graphics. And at first it was cool, but I was kind of like, I already know what these people are going to do and what these people are going to say. But there are performance issues with that game, especially some of the end game stuff where things get really crazy. Like, there are performance issues. And it's like, well, how is this game having so many problems? How is this game having so many issues? If you're in your own words, you say that games are developed for high-end hardware and then optimized and tested on low-spec hardware. What's higher hardware than the PlayStation 5? Or even what's higher hardware than the most beefy PC that exists on the marketplace? I feel like this is not just an Unreal Engine 5 problem, even though that does play a role in it. I feel like this is a video game problem in and of itself, where we have this mentality of we can fix it later, we can patch it later. And for smaller games, for smaller studios, I have a little bit more sympathy. I have a little bit more compassion. I have a little bit more empathy. But for these big AAA studios, I really don't. You know, when you see a game like Metal Gear Solid Delta come out and there's a laundry list of bugs and things that, you know, Konami comes out and says, oh, we got to fix these things. Lost Soul Aside just released. Another laundry list of bugs, issues, and things that need to be ironed out. It's like, why are day one adopters the beta testers now? Do you not have beta testers to test out these games anymore? Have the games just gotten so big that you don't even bother doing it? You just hope for the best and put it out there? That's not necessarily a Nintendo Switch 2 specific issue. That is a video game company issue and a video game industry issue as a whole. So I don't know. You know, I don't know how how impactful these words should really be and how, important these words should really be considered because of who is saying it and what Epic Games is about with Unreal Engine 5. It's like you kind of lose some of your clout and your meaning and your words when your company and your engine doesn't seem to be very well optimized for anything. Whether it's a high-end PC or a Nintendo Switch 2, it doesn't seem to matter. There's going to be problems across the board on it. But those are just my thoughts on it. I think the message itself, is decent. Obviously, optimization is key. You can make some very impressive things if you have the time to do such. But when Nintendo is limiting the amount of dev kits that are out there, that just means that the transition period between highly optimized games and lower optimized games is going to take longer than it probably should. Nintendo needs to be sending these dev kits out there. If a game takes a little bit longer, I mean, it does. I know I talked about Sonic Cross Worlds and the Nintendo Switch 2 version of that game being delayed, but if it makes for a better product, in the end, I think it's worth it. But it also brings up the conversation point of, well, why didn't this team at Sega have access to the developer kit at the same time as it did for the other versions of the game? And it's accumulation. It's really accumulation of different factors. And I feel like the industry is to blame, the engines are to blame, and to some degree, Nintendo is to blame as well. But let me know what you think of everything in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.